We look forward to a rich and interesting discussion on this issue tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on the Vice Consul General at the Consulate General of China in Mumbai, Ms. Yanhua Wang. You have the floor.
Honorable Ministers, Madam Chair, colleagues, the global endeavor against terrorism has made great progress in recent years, while the threat of terrorism is still growing. Especially the terrorism financing shows a diversified trend, and the internet becomes an important financing platform for terrorist organizations. The fact that terrorists use digital currency to finance should be concerned. New methods and features of terrorism financing not only pose challenges to international counter-terrorism cause, but also undermine the stability and the safety of international financial system. China proposes, firstly, we should firmly foster the concept of community of shared future. Terrorism knows no borders. We share the common stakes, so we must work together to promote the cooperation on counter-terrorism financing with the principles of objectivity, professionalism, and pragmatism. We should strengthen coordination on global, regional, and national level. It's important to respect the leading role of all countries in combating terrorism financing, avoid mutual accusations, and politicizing technical issues. Secondly, we should promote capacity of combating terrorism financing. We should take an objective view of the gap in financial regulation between developing and developed countries. Through mechanisms such as UNOCT, UNSCCTC, UNOTC, FATF, FSIBS, we are committed to providing constructive support to developing countries. Thirdly, we should strive to eliminate the root causes of terrorism. Counterterrorism requires a comprehensive approach to address both the symptoms and root causes. We must take political, economic, and judicial measures in an integral manner to eradicate the breeding ground of terrorism. The international community should accelerate the implementation of 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and break the vicious circle of poverty and terrorism. China attaches great importance to combating terrorism financing and plays a positive role in relative international cooperation, making important contributions to international and regional peace and stability, as well as the security of the international financial system. We are ready to work with the international community in strengthening cooperation and communication on combating terrorism financing and making unremitting efforts to eliminate the threat of terrorism so as to achieve world peace and development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now turn to Ambassador Vanessa Frazier, Permanent Representative of Malta to the United Nations in New York. Vanessa, you may please speak from the podium. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my gratitude to the Government of India for hosting us and for all the preparations that were made to ensure that the special meeting of the Counterterrorism Committee can successfully convene outside its usual seat in New York. The wreath-laying ceremony we experienced earlier reminds us of the horrors of terrorism and violent extremism. Malta also pays its respect to all those that lost lives during the Mumbai attacks. Malta remains convinced of the need of a multilateral approach to countering terrorism. The level and complexity involved in the spread of radical ideologies and violent extremism permeating through all our societal structures informs us that only through international cooperation can we better improve law enforcement, border security, the mastering of new and emerging technologies, and the respect for human rights. As an incoming member of the UN Security Council, Malta is committed to work closely with the Counterterrorism Committee and within the Security Council in ensuring that countering terrorism receives the importance it deserves. I am sure we will have more opportunities to explore ways of ensuring that the Security Council stays ahead of the curve on a pivotal issue such as new and emerging technologies during the formal session tomorrow. Turning to terrorism financing, it is important to acknowledge that terrorist organizations have continuously developed new means to access funds for their operations. These include the proceeds of criminal activity, including money laundering and the use of new virtual and anonymous payment methods. Improved law enforcement, including of cross-border criminal activity, and the use of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence can help us bridge the gap with the ever-evolving strategies employed by terrorist organizations. Malta currently hosts the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law, which provides capacity building to prosecutors and the judiciary of neighboring countries and beyond, in a bid to improve the criminal justice skills of practitioners to effectively address terrorism and cross-border crime, in compliance with human rights and the rule of law. Law enforcement and the judiciary also need to be well equipped to prosecute cases which are becoming more complex and include elements linked with criminalities and violent extremism. We thank all the briefers for their insights on combating terrorism financing, and we very much look forward to work with the current and incoming members of the Council to ensure that our global approach towards countering terrorism remains effective and sensitive to what lies on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now turn to His Excellency Domingos Fernandes, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Mozambique to the United Nations. You may please speak from the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Your Excellency, Mr. Michael Moussadam, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Gabon and President of the United Nations Security Council. Your Excellency, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, Minister of Foreign Affairs of India. Your Excellency, Mr. Vladimir Voronkov, Undersecretary General for Counterterrorism of the United Nations Office, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. We are gathered here to pay tribute and express our most sincere solidarity to the innocent victims of 2008 terrorist attack in this place. I wish to thank with deep appreciation the Security Council Committee of the United Nations and the Government of India for organizing this important ceremony to remind all of us what happened in this hotel 14 years ago. My country, Mozambique, associates itself with other delegations to express once again our deep condolences to all families who have lost their loved ones and those who were injured. Madam Chair, it is clear testimony that terrorist activities do not select and care of the victims. In 2008, lives of innocent people were lost, and today, beyond the humans and also economic and social infrastructures have been destroyed, leaving families disintegrated or traumatized. Most of the target victims are children, women, people with disability, and elders. It's also with concern we witness the spread of the terrorism over the world, posing a serious threat to international peace and security. No country is immune from terrorist attacks, and no single country can succeed in combating terrorism. We need combined actions through reinforced cooperation at national, regional, and international level using various instruments and strategies to fight this phenomenon. Therefore, this event is a fundamental tool at this junction. The presence of representatives of the states and other segments of the society, it testifies the importance and pressing need to act in a collective manner to find the root sources that sustain terrorists. This collective action would enhance our effort to avoid that non-state actors use science and new technologies to commit brutal and inhuman practices. Mozambique believes that the fight against terrorism will succeed through a consolidated and holistic approach, combining technology, control of proliferation of arms in hands of terrorist groups, tracking their financial transaction and avoiding more radicalization of a large number of people. In our perspective, these actions should be carried out everywhere at national, regional, and global levels in order to prevent that cybercrimes and finances are used for terrorist purposes. In this context, most vulnerable countries need to be supported financially to acquire necessary capacity to track and seize goods of the terrorist groups. Finally, Chairperson, we would like to reiterate Mozambique's commitment to the global effort and synergies to eradicate terrorism worldwide. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Ambassador of the Republic of Ecuador to India, Mr. Francisco Teodoro Maldonado Guevara. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excellencies, distinguished participants and colleagues. First of all, on behalf of the government of Ecuador, allow me to pay homage to the victims of the Mumbai terrorist attacks and their families 14 years ago. Ecuador, my country, strongly condemns and rejects all forms of terrorism. It is a moral imperative, and we therefore remain committed and determined to working together to adopt and implement at the multilateral level effective measures to counter the use of emerging technologies for terrorist purposes. Allow me to express as well our appreciation to the Government of India for hosting the special meeting of the Counter-Terrorism Committee, as well as our gratitude for its generosity in facilitating the participation of my delegation, which is one additional example of the consistent policy of cooperation that India maintains towards fellow developing countries in several areas. As an incoming member of the Security Council, Ecuador follows with great interest the deliberations that take place within the CTC. In that respect, we are of the view that the selected topic for the meeting is pertinent and timely. We share the concerns expressed about the grave threat that terrorism continues to pose to peace, security, and democracy in several parts of the world, including our own region. It is therefore urgent that governments, international organizations, and organizations from civil society strengthen their level of coordination in order to combat this threat. It is for this reason that my delegation welcomes the organization of this meeting. In closing, we would like to reiterate our appreciation to the Government of India for hosting this meeting, and we are confident that it will provide us with valuable inputs for our participation in the Security Council, as well as for designing national policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now invite the Consul General of Japan in Mumbai, Dr. Fukahori Yasukata. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Jai Shankar, Minister of External Affairs of India, Ministers of Member States, heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to extend our congratulations on holding this special meeting. Japan would like to take a moment to send out the deepest condolences to those who lost their lives and their loved ones in the horrendous terrorist attacks that happened here 14 years ago. Japan welcomes and commends the success of the first Global Congress of Victims of Terrorism in September this year. We condemn terrorism and violent extremism in all forms and reiterate that there can be no justification for acts of terror and on any grounds whatsoever. We reiterate our condemnation of terrorist attacks, including this 26th of November Mumbai attacks. As highlighted in the 15th report of the Secretary General, the threat posed by ISIL remains high in conflict zones and the neighboring countries. I would like to point out the following two principles that need to be respected in conducting international cooperation to address the root causes of fragility that provide breeding grounds for terrorist groups and safe havens for such groups to carry out transnational activities. First and foremost, I would like to emphasize the importance of promoting and respecting the rule of law. Without a rules-based international order, transnational terrorist activities will never cease to be supported by someone. The second principle I wish to highlight is the respect for the national ownership of recipient countries. As the 8th Tokyo International Congress on African Development, known as the TICAD 8, held in Tunisia this summer, Japan expressed its strong support for the promotion of the rule of law through institution building, the strengthening of governance in the judicial and administrative fields, and the return of constitutional order to conflict-affected countries. We look forward to constructively engaging in the 8th review of the Global Counterterrorism Strategy next year. Next year, Japan will serve as an elected member of the Security Council. We hope to cooperate with other Security Council members to address this important global theme together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I now call on Dr. Daniel Frank. He's the head of Counterterrorism Coordination, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland. You have the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express our gratitude to the Government of India for hosting the special meeting of the Counterterrorism Committee of the UN Security Council and for its warm hospitality. At the outset, I would like to acknowledge the significance of this venue, where in 2008 over 30 people died in the terrorist attacks of 26 November. Switzerland strongly condemns this heinous crime and stands in solidarity with the families and friends of those who lost their lives. Today, we are also grateful to the survivors that shared their very personal stories. All victims of terrorism deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. We all have the obligation to support them wherever we can, including by protecting their rights to remedy, just satisfaction, individually tailored measures that reflect each survivor's individual needs, taking into account the victim's gender, age, disability, and origin. Furthermore, states should identify, in cooperation with victims' organizations and other civil society actors, specific measures that prevent the recurrence of these crimes. To that end, measures designed at the institutional, community, and individual levels can inhibit best the efforts of terrorist networks. Madam Chair, the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy enshrines a holistic and balanced approach to countering terrorism. Switzerland has referenced the global strategy as a guideline in its own national counterterrorism strategy, as well as its strong commitment to the implementation of United Nations Security Council resolutions. As a future member of the Security Council, we will be a reliable partner in the fight against terrorism and continue to emphasize that counterterrorism efforts can only be effective if they respect the rule of law and do not violate international law, including human rights and international humanitarian law. Against this background, we continue to highlight the important work done by humanitarian organizations and civil society actors. When designing or implementing counterterrorism measures, the United Nations and states must always take into account their humanitarian impact and the potential effects of these measures on humanitarian activities. These measures and recommendations must be designed to ensure that terrorists are brought to justice, that conditions conducive to the spread of terrorism and violent extremism are eliminated, and affected states have rule of law-based institutions to effectively prevent and counter terrorism. Finally, as a financial center of global importance, Switzerland is strongly committed to the effective fight against the financing of terrorism. We are grateful to India for convening this topic in the special meeting of the CTC by both exploring the risks and opportunities presented by the vast technological changes in the finance industry. Switzerland also commends India for organizing the third No Money for Terror ministerial conference in New Delhi in a few weeks in order to deepen our understanding for these challenges and to finding solutions. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. With that, we have concluded the statements from the current and incoming UNSC member states. We're coming up to our last three statements, interventions from senior officials from the United Nations. It is my honor to invite Mr. Vladimir Voronkov, the Under-Secretary General, the UN Office of Counter-Terrorism, for making a statement. Mr. Voronkov, may I invite you to the podium.
Distinguished Madam Chair, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I start by thanking the government of Republic of India for organizing this very important meeting. Thank you for your warm hospitality. We stand in solidarity with the victims and survivors of terrorist attacks carried out around the world, including here in Mumbai, at this hotel 14 years ago. Victims and survivors are the face of our common humanity. They remind us why we need to act with resolve and unity to break free from terrorist violence and address the conditions conducive to its spread. They inspire us to do more and to ensure that their voices are heard, their dignity defended, their needs addressed, and their rights upheld. Societies benefit when victims and survivors are placed at the heart of our efforts to prevent and counter terrorism. The international community has made significant progress over the last decade to highlight the importance of the role of victims and survivors in countering terrorism. This includes, for example, the adoption of General Assembly resolutions, one proclaiming 21st of August as the International Day of Remembrance of and Tribute to the Victims of Terrorism, and another one on the enhancement of international cooperation to assist the victims of terrorism. Several member states have also strengthened their legislation and developed national comprehensive assistance plans to better protect, assist, and support victims and survivors of terrorism. While such progress is commendable, concrete and tangible action is needed to comprehensively address the individual rights and needs of victims and survivors of terrorism around the world. This was the clear call to action of victims during the first ever United Nations Global Congress of Victims of Terrorism, organized by my office last month in New York. During the Congress, victims call on the international community to work together, to do more, to support them, and to keep their interests front and center in the fight against terrorism. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for a particular focus on the provision of mental health and psychosocial support services to victims and their communities for as long as necessary. The United Nations Office of Counterterrorism will continue to prioritize the rights and needs of victims across all the areas of its work. Let's renew our commitment to honor, advocate for, and support victims and survivors of terrorism. Let us rise to this challenge, inspired by their courage and strength. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, I wish to announce that we have in our midst right now the Honorable Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Shri Eknath Shinde ji. Sir, we are deeply honored to have you in our presence, and the entire hospitality and organization, needless to say, of this excellent conference has been made possible only with his support. With that, I will now turn to Mr. Chan Vek-Xiong, the active Executive Director of the Counter-Terrorism Committee Executive Directorate. May I request you to make your statement?
Your Honorable the Minister of External Affairs, Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished participants, I wish to commend the Chair of the Counterterrorism Committee for her leadership in spearheading the initiative and organizing the committee's special meeting on countering the use of new and emerging technologies for terrorist purposes. Today, on behalf of CTED, I wish to offer heartfelt condolences to the victims of the Mumbai terrorist attacks, including the first responders and civilians. We unite to commemorate and pay tribute to victims of terrorism, past and present, here and beyond and across the globe, and to provide a platform for their voices to be heard, their interests to be addressed, and their rights to be protected. In accordance with the Council Resolutions 2395 and 2617, CTED, in close cooperation with the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, has taken into account the important roles victims and their networks can play in countering terrorism. In particular, our analysis of effective practices and experiences includes measures adopted by member states in compensate victims and provide support services. Seated under the policy guidance of the Counterterrorism Committee and relevant Council resolutions, has its unique role to play in the global endeavors to combat terrorism and countering violent extremism conducive to terrorism. Within the UN counterterrorism architecture, it is an assessor of member states' counterterrorism efforts, a facilitator of delivery of technical assistance to member states in need, a promoter of international standards, codes and practices, and useful experiences, as well as an analysis of new and emerging trends and challenges for the policymakers of the committee and the Council as a whole. It works with member states, other UN entities, international and regional organizations, civil society organizations, and other partners as well. Against the backdrop of the evolving terrorism landscape, the special meeting comes at the right moment to discuss the right topics with a view to exploring the right approaches and taking all possible cooperative measures to prevent and counter such threats. CTED remains steadfast in its commitment to working with all stakeholders and players to achieve the objectives as set forth by the Council resolutions as well as the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we move to the closing remarks. I have the honor to request Secretary West, Shri Sanjay Verma, to deliver the closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chief Minister Eknath Shinde-ji, Mr. Michael Moussa Adamo, Foreign Minister of Gabon and the President of the UN Security Council, Ministers, Excellencies, and distinguished participants. Every act of terror results in some human cost. Statistics are numbers, and numbers sometimes merely desensitize us. But terrorism is real and it is evil. It is around us. It is therefore apt that the special meeting of the Counterterrorism Committee has met in a space once destroyed by a ghastly act of terror. The horrors of those fateful days in 2008 were felt again today by us, particularly through personal testimonies of some of the survivors. I thank Moshe Holzberg, Mr. Karambir Kang, Ms. Nidhi Chapekar, and Ms. Devika Rotavan for sharing their personal tragedies and Ms. Vaishali Tukaram Mumbale for being with us today. Mumbai is a city of dreams. For millions, this city continues to be the custodian of their aspirations. It is also called the gateway to India, and for all the possibilities it holds, it is also referred to as the maximum city. The 26/11 attacks were schemed to destroy the spirit of one of the world's greatest symbols of diversity, free enterprise, and creativity. But that act also had a consequence on lives from Australia, Austria, Canada, China, Finland, France, Germany, Israel, Italy, Japan, Jordan, Malaysia, Mauritius, Mexico, Netherlands, Norway, Oman, the Philippines, Singapore, Spain, Thailand, United Kingdom, and the United States of America. Many of our distinguished delegates present here today come from these countries and will therefore sense the anguish even more. Excellencies, allow me to record a deep sense of gratitude to all the Counter-Terrorism Committee members and other member states for their homage to the victims of the 26/11 attacks. We also especially convey our gratitude to the Foreign Minister of Gabon, Ghana, the UK, USA, and Minister of State from the UAE for their powerful messages. Our appreciation also goes out to the distinguished ministerial representatives from Albania and ambassadors and heads of delegations of the UN Security Council member states, and to the UN Under-Secretary General for Counterterrorism, Mr. Vladimir Voronkov. The briefing on counter-financing of terror is essential to any counterterrorism narrative. We received these inputs thanks to the Counterterrorism Executive Directorate, particularly Mr. David Scaria and Ms. Jennifer Bramlett. We equally acknowledge the contribution of all our distinguished briefers, like Joint Secretary Thakur, Special Secretary Rizvi. We also acknowledge the presence of the media and other participants for their presence and contribution in today's session. I also thank Dr. S. Jaishankar, Honorable External Affairs Minister of India, for his presence, opening remarks, and his guidance in organizing the special meeting of the CTC in India. We extend our gratitude to the Honorable Chief Minister of Maharashtra, His Excellency Shri Eknath Shinde, and his senior officials, particularly the Commissioner of Mumbai Police, Vivek Phansalkar. Some words in recognition of this legendary Taj Mahal Hotel and its courageous staff, who stood up to threats and demonstrated that the big fight against terrorism can also sometimes be led by simple individuals and civilians. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as humans, post any trauma, we seek answers or explanations. Can 26/11 ever be undone? Can lives lost, Indian or foreign, be relived? Can emotional scars be erased? Sadly, perhaps never. But as we leave the shores of this iconic city, may this first ever presence of the representatives of the Security Council here in Mumbai provide a sliver of a closure to the families and friends of those 166 victims whose lives were plucked away in 2008. We also hope that this visit and the ensuing dialogue adds to our resolve that 26/11s will never happen again, whether in India or elsewhere in the world. On behalf of the Government of India, I thank you for your presence and participation.
I thank the Secretary for his remarks. And before we move to closure, 3 important announcements. The first, lunch. I wish to announce that for all heads of delegation, the lunch will be served at the Gateway Room, which is right next door. For the others, the venue is the ballroom, also quite close by. May I request that all others remain seated as the heads of delegation first move to the Gateway Room for lunch. The second announcement is about departure. All are requested to gather at the tower lobby of the hotel by 3:30 to catch the buses that will take us onward to the airport and then to our next destination, Delhi. And finally, the third announcement is about photographs. I'm told that all delegates can download pictures of today's meeting from a Google Drive link, which is being circulated, I'm told, by the CTED. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.
My name is Asya. We're from Kiev. So we're trying to reach Poland. It was really difficult to leave him because he has to stay in Kiev due to his work on the ambulance. And he has to save lives here, so we have to go together and we have to save our own lives. The house that was bombed yesterday was like 20 minutes from our house, so we decided it's time to go. You cannot really feel anger because this is something we really expected for the past 8 years. I think I'll remember the first day forever because this was really hard. The best I can do is to save my mom and my daughter. So that's what I'm doing.
I'm here in Copenhagen at the UNICEF Supply Division warehouse where UNICEF staff are rapidly assembling and shipping vital supplies to Ukraine, including personal protective equipment, medical supplies and surgical equipment, midwifery kits, and other critical supplies. The needs of children and families are growing by the hour. UNICEF has 140 people on the ground in Ukraine and 13 mobile units deployed in eastern Ukraine that are trying to reach the children most affected. I want to send a message to each and every one of them. We are standing with you and will do everything we can to help you reach every child in need in Ukraine. These children have already suffered 8 years of conflict. They need peace now, and they need the world to answer UNICEF's call for immediate support so we can keep delivering life-saving supplies and services. There is no time to waste.